Hot off the presses, posted 1 minute ago, the patch that's going to completely change Diablo 4. All the itemization stuff, huge class balancing, and there's stuff in here that they didn't even talk about in the campfire chat. So I'm going to give a summary of everything in these patch notes, bit of a TLDR, so that you don't have to read the 10,000 plus words yourself if you don't want to. But if you do, I will have the link in the description of the video so you can read them for yourself. Basically, what's happening? April 2nd, the PTR is coming. It will last a week through April 9th. I believe you need to be on PC and using the Battle.net client to access it. I don't think you can access it from Steam. Itemization changes, they just go over again. Legendary items are only going to have 3 affixes now, and rares will only have 2, but they're going to be more potent affixes. They've removed irrelevant affixes, and they added some new ones, some really cool sounding ones: resource per second, resource on kill, lucky hit applying vulnerable, life per hit, and basic skill ranks, rather than just having like +1 to fireball and then +1 to hydra. It's just going to be skills. Like, you'll just get skills in a certain category. So much easier to get your items. Legendary items are always going to drop 925 item power from enemy level 95 plus. So once you've reached level 95, basically, and everything you find is level 95 plus, you're going to get all max power items. Gems have been simplified. Salvaging has been simplified. A lot of the different materials have gone away. Rerolling cost when enchanting is going to have a cap now on gold, so you're not going to be paying 50 million gold just to reroll your item. Materials have been removed and consolidated, and forgotten souls are going to be obtainable in a lot more areas just from playing the game. Elite drops and whispers. Uniques are going to appear earlier and more often. They're going to drop in World Tier 1 and 2, and Uber Uniques can drop now from monster level 55 plus. They also buffed the drop rates of Uber Uniques in the previous season, so expect to potentially see one on your playthrough. The new crafting system tempering allows you to add 2 affixes now to your items. So those legendary items that are dropping with 3 affixes now, you can temper further to get to 5 affixes. You can choose from 2 of the potential categories: weapon affixes, offensive, defensive, utility, mobility, and resource, just like with affixes in the Codex of Power, and add random affixes to your item. You're going to have to re-roll them. Your items have tempering durability, which is how many times you can roll an affix. They've also introduced greater affixes, which are just empowered affixes. Now, if you drop an item with a greater affix, it is going to play an audio cue, which they did not talk about in the campfire chat. You're going to be able to tell just from the drop that it's an item with a greater affix, and then it'll also tell you how many affixes are greater on them, 1 up to 4. So 4 would be for instance, a unique item, which can still spawn 4 affixes. You could have potentially a unique item with all 4 greater affixes, which is insane. Greater affix rolls are going to be a 1.5 multiplier on the affix's max roll, and they can be enhanced further through Masterworking. Masterworking is a late game crafting system where you use materials that you get from the pit, which is a new end game system similar to Greater Rifts, which we'll go over in a second. You can upgrade your item. This is basically like the blacksmith upgrading system that has now been removed. You can upgrade an item 12 times, and there's a chance at each interval of 4 to get a mega boost to one of your affixes, basically. And those 3 mega boosts could all potentially land on the same affix, so you could just have an Uber aspect on one of your items. Codex of Power updates. The Codex of Power is going to have every affix in the game that's legendary, and when you salvage an item, whatever the highest affix roll you got is going to be your Codex affix, and you're going to be able to use that level of the affix going forward. So if you get a perfect disobedience affix, that's all you have to do for the whole season, and you can use perfect disobedience imprints on any of your items going forward. Changes to Helltides are also coming. As you battle through Helltides, you'll gain threat. How much threat is based on the difficulty of the monster and how many that you have defeated. Once your threat raises to one of 3 tiers, the dangers and frequency of monsters increase. Once you've reached the max, the game is going to spawn a Hellborn, which looks like the old Bloodborne bosses, which is a very, very powerful boss that you're going to fight and take down and get some rewards. We don't know exactly what they're going to drop yet. So here's what it looks like. Here you can see the bar. It's 3 tiers, 1, 2, and 3. And once it fills up all the way, you get the boss. There's also going to be this accursed ritual, which is really cool. I don't think we saw it in the campfire chat either. This basically is the old blood harvest method of 3 people get together. They get a summoning material that they found in Helltides. They take them to the ritual altars, and you spawn a bunch of demons. And this was an insanely powerful method for speed farming, for item farming, and now this is coming permanently to Helltides. So I could see this being a huge strategy for getting those early levels and items once you get into World Tier 3 and World Tier 4. And it says that after you fight all the demons, the event will climax with a Blood Maven that has great reward upon her death. We'll see how great that reward is. But that gets me a little bit excited. Helltide's also available in World Tier 1 and 2. They're just going to have less density, no roaming bosses, but they will be available from the start. Pits. So pits are a progressively more difficult dungeon that you unlock after a 46 tier nightmare dungeon. So that they've explained to us is how you're going to unlock the pits. Once you complete a tier 46 nightmare dungeon, you can go and start your journey into the pits. Pits are going to be necessary for that masterworking material. There's a 10-minute timer. Dying adds 30 seconds to your timer. And then as you slay monsters, you fill up the bar. And once you've filled up your bar, you will get to fight the boss of the pit. Also, based on how fast you are clearing the pit, you will get to jump up additional tiers. That's actually a really nice mechanic so that if you're a bit overpowered, you can scale up your pit level quite quickly. Boss ladder updates for getting Andariel. She is going to deal shadow, fire, and lightning damage along with her iconic poison attack. So this is a multi-elemental boss, which worries me when we think about the empowered version, which they talk about here. Tormented echoes of all ladder bosses now are going to be summonable at level 200. I really like the bosses that only have 1 damage type because you can kind of stack resistance to that 1 damage type with elixirs and other gear options. But here with Andariel, the fact that she is dealing a mixture of 4 different elemental types is going to be really hard to defend against. But that's really cool. I'm excited to see that boss fight. For testing in the PTR, you're going to get campaign completion, a bunch of skill points, mounts. Fog of War is going to be released. You get 100 million gold, you get obols, and you'll get this every time you make a character. So you can pretty much start out right at endgame, which is a good opportunity for you to try what's coming in the new season without the commitment of having to level up a 100. If you have the Battle.net client and you play on PC, you'll be able to do this. You provide feedback through the forums, steps for installing the PTR, be in the Battle.net launcher, and now the class updates and full patch notes. So this is a lot, and there's a lot of stuff hidden in here, but basically the gist of it is there are many impactful class updates. They're trying to move the needle, updating systems and designs instead of simply setting damage or health higher or lower. They're making flat damage and legendaries more viable. Currently, they don't scale well, so now they're going to scale with your weapon damage. And then they're opening up the design to be more generally useful so that you can make more connections and more builds. They went over an example in the campfire chat of Dust Devil barbarians and how those are changing. So these changes are just opening up a ton of build diversity. We'll go over the new items that are coming, which we haven't seen some of these yet. There's Tyrael's Might, which we did see. While at full life, your skills unleash a divine barrage dealing damage. This is very similar to how an artillery shrine looks currently, but you will get this as a unique item, and I believe this is uber unique. And then also there's going to be Yen's Blessing, which are boots. Casting a skill has a 20-30% chance to cast a non-mobility, non-ultimate skill that is currently on cooldown. Wow. This effect can only occur once every 12 seconds. This is kind of nutty. It's on the boot slot, which I think a lot of classes probably have opened up I think there's a lot of opportunity in the boot slot for something like this that actually could be pretty busted. Immediately my mind goes to a core only. Immediately my mind goes to something like a core only rogue that has imbuements on cooldown, and now you're just spamming your core skill, and every 2 to 3 times out of 10 when you're spamming that core skill, you're going to be able to use your imbuement skill that's on cooldown, which is kind of insane to think about. I'm really looking forward to these boots. I think this could open up so many options on builds in general. I'm really interested to see how those play out. Some new legendary aspects. Frosty Strides. While below 40-60% life, evade freezes close enemies for cold damage and applies vulnerable to them for 3 seconds. And then aspect of concussive strikes. It's a lucky hit proc. Damaging an enemy has up to 20% chance to daze them for 2 seconds. You deal 5 to 20% increased damage to dazed enemies. So remember, when you read these, if there's a period and a new statement, this means you're always going to deal 5 to 20% damage to dazed enemies. But then also you get the ability to daze them more potentially. But if you're already dazing everything, then this is just a huge damage buff. The Barbarian unique items. Ariat's Bearing, unique pants. Ancients you summon are empowered. Corley creates an earthquake that deals physical damage over 4 seconds when he leaps. Talik leaves behind dust devils that deal damage when he whirlwinds. And Modok ignites the ground, burning enemies for an additional damage over 4 seconds when he upheaves the ground. And then there's Twin Strikes, unique gloves. After casting Double Swing 4 times, your next Double Swing will hit 2 additional times, each dealing 10 to 25% increased damage. So they're doubling the amount of new unique items that they're giving us. I would like to see this maybe doubled again. I'd love to see like 4 unique items each season. But this is great that they're just giving us more unique items that are sort of build enabling, like these, such as, you know, the Ancients, and specifically designed towards double swing. So that's pretty cool. And then there's also going to be a legendary affix for Barbarians, which I believe we saw this one. Your shout skills create 5 dust devils that deal damage to enemies along their path, and your dust devils are 5 to 15% bigger and deal 1% increased damage for each 1% of their size is increased. Pretty cool. And then the Druid unique items. Earthbreaker, a new unique ring. Landslide causes the ground to erupt in tectonic spikes, which continue to deal 0.6 to 0.9 damage over 2 seconds. Casting Landslide in this area has a 20-30% chance to cause additional landslide pillars to spawn within. Jeez, I don't play Druid, but that sounds pretty broken. Wild Heart Hunger, unique boots. When you shapeshift into a werewolf or werebear, you gain Wild Heart for 5 seconds. Wild Heart grants you 1 to 1.5 increased damage with shapeshifting skills every 2 seconds, stacking 20 times. And then the legendary aspect for Druid is aspect of the Fevered Mauling. When you hit at least one enemy with Maul, increase its attack speed by 1 to 2%, and you gain 1 to 3% damage reduction for 5 seconds, and this stacks for 5 times. The Necromancer uniques. Ebon Piercer, a unique amulet. Blight also shoots 4 smaller projectiles that pierce enemies and deal shadow damage over 3 seconds. There's also Curer's Embrace, which are unique gloves for the Necromancer. Blood Surge consumes corpses to cause mini novas, dealing damage. Damage is increased by 10% per target drained by the initial cast up to 50%. Damage is also increased 20% for each corpse consumed. And then we have the legendary aspect for Necromancers. Aphotic aspect. Skeletal priests empower your skeletal warriors attacks to deal shadow damage and have 5 to 15% chance to stun enemies for 1.5 seconds. So we've got a summon aspect here. They also noted that Necromancer minions and Druid minions are going to get 100% of the player stats now, which is a big buff from previous seasons. So maybe we see some summoner builds. Here we go. The Rogue. Rogue unique items. Scoundrel's Kiss, which is a unique ring. Rapid Fire now lobs exploding arrows that deal 5 to 25% increased damage. I'm wondering if this is in addition to or instead of how Rapid Fire currently functions right now. So are we just getting additional lobbing exploding arrows, or is it completely replacing how Rapid Fire works? So interested to test this one out. I'll test it in the PTR. And then the Saboteur's Signet. Casting Flurry has a 15 to 30% chance to release stun grenades that deal physical damage and stun enemies for 1 second. So your grenades have a 5% lucky hit chance. Then we have our new legendary aspect for the Rogue, Barrage again. Another Barrage aspect. This one sounds crazy. Barrage arrows now pierce through one enemy, and Barrage just has 10 to 20% increased attack speed. Barrage stonks up for season 4. Looking forward to testing that one out as well. The new Sorcerer unique items, I believe we saw this one. Fractured Winterglass, classing a frozen orb, has a 35 to 50% chance to spawn a random conjuration when it explodes, and then you can also have your conjuration have a lucky hit chance to cast another frozen orb. So you've got a frozen orb casting a conjuration that's casting a frozen orb. And then you have Flame Weaver unique gloves, which say casting Firebolt through your firewalls cause it to split into 4 bolts, dealing 80 to 100% more damage. That's pretty cool. I've seen stuff like this in other games like Path of Exile, where you shoot stuff through your firewalls and create some pretty cool interactions. I'm interested to see this one for Diablo 4 and Season 4. Some of these sorcerer changes are really cool. It's really making me think about playing one. And then the new legendary aspect of Tenuous Destruction, deals 25 to 40% increased damage while you have no defensive skills on your action bar. You also have Flamethrowers aspect, so you get 2 aspects for the sorcerer. Incinerate splits into 3 beams, each dealing 70 to 85% of normal damage. So an Incinerate skill. Balance updates. Okay, here are the nerfs. Now, balance doesn't always mean nerfs, but right off the bat, you see a big nerf to Banished Lord's Talisman. Large reduction in critical strike overpower damage, goes from 80 to 120 down to 20 to 60. Updated visuals so that you know your next core is going to overpower, so that's kind of a nice feature. And then the resources needed have been reduced down from 300 to 275. Tybalt's Will nerfs. Tybalt's Will, while unstoppable, the damage that you're getting is now just 10 to 20%. Previously, it was 20 to 40%, but it will last for 1 second longer. Disobedience. Okay, this is a really nice change to Disobedience. And I know in Season 3, we didn't really use Disobedience because we got the Juggernaut aspect, but when we're looking at potentially level 200 pits, you're probably going to have to run both Disobedience and Juggernaut at some point, I'm expecting. So now you're no longer going to lose stacks independently. They refresh every time you add a stack. So before, if you gained 1 stack, say that stack lasted for 5 seconds, and then you were up to 10 stacks, if 5 seconds went by, you lost that original stack. But now every stack you get is going to refresh all of your stacks, so it'll be much easier to get to that maximum level. Then they also changed the armor gain to 25 to 40%. Assimilation, previously you had 8% increased dodge chance versus enemies that were affected by damage over time. While you dodge, you gain 5% of your primary resource. Now you get 8% dodge chance, and you get Fortify for 5 to 20% of your maximum life with Assimilation. Aspect of Retribution, chance to stun increased from 8 to 10%, and you now increase your damage to stunned and knock down enemies. Intercom, previously was 5 to 10%, 40, and now it's 5 to 10%, triple this bonus after standing still for 3 seconds. So you always get 5 to 10%, and now the longer you stand still, if you stand still for 3 seconds, you can triple it. Aspect of the Crowded Sage, previously you healed for 0 to 181, now you just have an 8% dodge chance, and successful dodges restore maximum life. This is very interesting for a rogue, especially, which can stack so much dodge chance. Wow. This affix right here is absolutely nuts. If you get a max roll for a rogue, 20% of your maximum life is going to get restored for every successful dodge. That is insane amount of life sustain. I've been complaining about life sustain on rogue for so long. This Crowded Sage completely fixes that for a rogue, which can really stack dodge chance more so than other classes. I am looking at this one, and if these boss fights are, like really long boss fights and you're not just getting one shot, this affix will help you sustain so much life. So I'm really curious to see how the Crowded Sage works out. Bold Chieftains, now usable by barbarians and druids, and Needle Flare also applies thorns to necromancer minions. Here they note that the companions now receive 100% of player attributes. Everyone but Rogue. Rogue has a Shadow Clone. Can we get Shadow Clone to be fixed? Necromancer, Barb, Druid, and Sorc companions. All right. And skill tags have been updated everywhere to allow more aspects and other effects to affect more skills and abilities. Barbarians lost their damage reduction. Legendary powers that require Call of Ancients to be equipped no longer have that requirement. And then the rest of these are slight changes to the actual skills themselves, and they all pretty much go in line with what they said at the onset of the class balance changes. They're just little changes here and there. I'm not going to go through each one. The charge damage got reduced a bit. Call of the Ancients damages were slightly modified. Really, all of this we're going to have to test out in the game. Like, there have been so many changes now, and this is Blizzard's best attempt to balance for the new items that we're getting. But it's all going to, we're going to have to see how it plays out in the PTR. See a lot of cooldowns changing. I'll call out a few of the notables for Rogue specifically. They're really pushing stun grenades. The inner sight change we already knew about, and I don't think this changes much. Preparation, though, reducing energy requirement from 100 to 75. I'm actually thinking a lot about not running combo points now in Season 4 with the changes to preparation, with those new affixes that you can use a skill on cooldown potentially. There's a lot of options here. You might still have to run combo points for boss killing builds. You could potentially run pretty cool preparation builds, especially with the requirement now being reduced from 100 down to 75. That's a big buff. Flurry damage got buffed a bit. There's some fixes to the victimize, keep passive. Exploit weakness got buffed from 15% to 25%. Exploit weakness legendary node was already pretty good, and now it's going to be 25% damage. Lirana's Instinct legendary node now says when Inner Sight's gauge becomes full, you gain 100% dodge chance for 2 seconds. Your core skills deal increased damage by equal to 25% of your core skill damage bonus while Inner Sight gauge remains full. And then chip they brought up to be in line with some of the other glyphs. The chip glyph now is 9.9% bonus instead of 6.6. Encircling blades aspect increases the damage got increased a bit. There are a couple more changes to aspects. Let's see. Opportunist, now when you break stealth, you drop a cluster of stun grenades around that deal physical damage and stun for 1 second. Your grenade skills deal 25 to 40% more damage, so they're really pushing grenades this season. Tricksters now additionally increases grenade skills. More grenade skills now. Surprise. There's going to be so many ways to stack grenade skill damage. Jeez. Artful Initiative also is going to increase your grenade skills. These are all 25 to 40% increases to your grenade skills. So that was Artful Initiative, Surprise, Tricksters, and Opportunists. Uncanny Treachery, dealing damage to a dazed enemy with an agility skill, grants stealth. Siphoned Victuals, damaging a vulnerable enemy with a non-basic skill has a 5 to 20% chance to drop a healing potion. Frostbitten, enemies hit by your grenade skills can be frozen, and you deal 10 to 25% increased crit strike damage to stunned or frozen enemies. So they added stunned. Escape Artist, smoke grenade dodge effect cooldown has been significantly reduced from 45 down to 25 seconds. Quickening Fog, maximum dash cooldown reduction is reached from hitting 3 enemies, which was reduced from before you had to hit 5. Volatile Shadows, when a Dark Shroud shadow is removed, you trigger an explosion around yourself that deals shadow damage and applies shadow imbuement to each enemy it hits. That's really cool. Blast Trapper, dealing damage to enemies affected by your trap skill, has a 15 to 30% chance to cause an explosion that deals shadow damage and applies vulnerable. It's a bit of a buff there to Blast Trapper. Lethal Dusk, evading through an enemy infected by shadow imbuement, grants stealth for 4 seconds. Breaking stealth grants you 10 to 25% maximum life. It's really cool. Vengeful, dealing damage to vulnerable enemies, has a 25% chance to create an arrow storm at the location, dealing physical damage over 3 seconds. Your arrow storms deal 25 to 40% more damage. And then the aspect of arrow storms. Your marksman skills have a 36% chance to create an arrow storm at the enemy's location, and it just increases those arrow storm damages as well. Unique items, Writhing Brand of Trickery had its cooldown reduced from 10 to 6 seconds, so you can get more of those taunts up. And that was it for the rogue changes. So some of the other things I want to note, again, the rest of these are just changes to, they're just little balancing things for each class. So the rogue ones weren't too impactful. I could see some cool things coming out of it, but they're just some balances to make more builds viable and the game more exciting. Loot drops, you're only going to find Sacred in World Tier 3. You're only going to find Ancestral in World Tier 4. Rarity drop chances have been adjusted. Item powers now increases every 5 levels instead of 50. They changed elixirs, and they just made them a lot more simple. Instead of weak, strong, and potent, you just have Elixir of Cold Res, Elixir of Cold Res 2. Pretty straightforward. They added some new elixirs. Elixir of Holy Bolts. After killing an enemy, Holy Bolts fire from the corpse of that enemy. And then Elixir of Momentum. This one's going to be insane for speed running or anything that requires speed. Killing an enemy increases your movement speed by 3% for 5 seconds, and you can stack it up to 15 times. 45% movement speed potentially. Crazy. You can now zoom out your camera, which was a big deal for a lot of players. You can see a lot more field of view with that, and I'm pretty excited to use that myself. They released the Nightmare Dungeons for Season 4. See a return of some of the favorites here. Experience reward from completing dungeon events is increased. This one is huge. Damage over time effects will no longer interrupt channeling skills, and then channeling times for interactable objects such as picking up bloodstones or activating switches have been adjusted from various times of between 1 to 2 seconds down to 0.75 seconds. I wish they would just remove this cooldown entirely, but I can see why they're keeping it. I hope and pray that this damage over time canceling your channeling will also apply to interactable objects, not just skills, because everyone knows how annoying it is. You're trying to go through a portal and you have damage over time on you, and it just interrupts your channeling to get through that dang portal, and there's no way. You just have to wait for your damage over time effect to wear off before you can actually do it. It's just such a clunky thing that still exists in the game, and I'm hoping that these changes also apply there. There's been some accessibility fixes that were bug fixes, and then bug fixes also to the class. These are just little things. Enhanced Shadow Imbue was always granting extra critical strike for all enemies instead of just injured. Thorn's damage was applying critical strike effect from Sky Hunter. These seem pretty small. Some of the classes have a lot bigger changes, just little bug fix changes. Not going to go into the details of all those. They don't seem too impactful. Oh, they fixed some issues with Uber Lilith and how her attack hitboxes weren't syncing up, so that's nice that they've improved those. Looking forward to getting back into those Uber fights and the new Uber fights. Hopefully they are of that same level. You are going to be able to filter your stash now by item power, which is pretty cool. We're pretty much only going to have 925 items now with the changes that are coming. And that's it. I mean, that's the majority. It is going to feel like a completely new game when we log in April 2nd if you're playing the PTR. Otherwise, May 14th for Season 4. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you are too. Leave your feedback in the comments. I'll look through it, and I'm curious to start a discussion. What do you think about these changes? What still needs to be changed? Otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.